Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tarnished Bronze. We've got a very different episode for you today. We are going to go through some of the finest Dungeons and Dragons comic book ads, particularly those from the late Bronze Age, i.e., the early 90s, where TSR was just really trying to push a lot of D&D product. This is basically before their massive implosion in the mid 90s, prior to Wizards of the Coast purchasing them. Just to give everyone of a certain age, they all remember these ads and they all remember either playing or Dungeons and Dragons just being part of the sort of underground comic book enthusiast role playing game culture that basically exploded kind of more mainstream once video games and board gaming became a over the table pastime as opposed to a sort of closeted pastime. And everyone will remember these ads from, like I said, early 90s comic books, Wizard magazine, particularly that second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuff, as well as the White Wolf Vampire the Masquerade. It kind of was going gangbusters. So, just full disclosure, this is the ad for what's called the Black Box, which has kind of like a file folder in it with individual reference cards of Dungeons and Dragons rules. This is basically maybe 8 to 10 years into the reign of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, particularly the second edition. But this was kind of meant to be the gateway drug to sort of allow people to get into it. Now, this is the first box set that I had, and it was my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons with um, basically books by J.R.R. Tolkien, Raymond E. Feist coming sort of in that same bracket of interest. So all of this hit me all at once, and then I realized that you could play a game based on these sort of fantasy characters. I think I also really enjoyed the fighting fantasy books, which was kind of like a cross between a choose your own adventure and a role playing game. So it had, life points and dice rolling and stuff like that. So that's where my introduction was. And this is kind of a magnificent box set if you ever see one. Plenty of people remember this. And my cousin Steve had the misfortune. I was like the only kid at home, had the misfortune of traveling a long way from Sydney to get to my house, only to be confronted with 8 hours of having to be playing Dungeons and Dragons with me. So thanks, Steve, for thanks, Steve, for sort of tolerating that. Um, the next couple of ones that should be pretty familiar. Here's the player's handbook and the monstrous manual. These ads were sort of plastering the back covers of a lot of these comics from basically 1990 to 1993. I think I was using the black box basically through primary school. And then when I started high school, we got a hold of the advanced Dungeons and Dragons second edition, which in our minds was just like so much more sophisticated, but was probably just not really that much difference to the black box stuff, to be honest, aside from just the abundance of extra materials. So that would include like Forgotten Realms and Ravenloft were two that we kind of had a homebrew going on. So, like I said, Raymond E. Feist was like a fantasy fiction um, author who made it big in the 80s, and his stories were actually based on the D&D campaign that he used to run. So, in that vein, we had this homebrew cooking between Ravenloft, Forgotten Realms, and some Raymond E. Feist elements. And of course, who can forget the great ads for the Forgotten Realms just really sold it. They're very immersive. So the other, you notice here, it's all this is a picture of the product. Here, the product is placed in sort of the environment that you would see. So that's a big dragon footprint in this ad. And then this one just has the total immersion. It's just the picture there. Basically, it says you can get this book, but this is a magnificent, like Clydesdale sort of or draft horse unicorn, fantastic female character here. I'd love to know who did this art. I'm just blanking on it. It may be a character like an artist who I'm going to name later, but I don't want to get it wrong, so I won't say. But it's just magnificent. She's got her sort of phallic sword thing going on there too. So there's a lot of a lot of things to unpack for a young man. But this Forgotten Realms ad lives long in the memory. I love it. And I yearn to be able to sort of get a really good repro of this picture for my kind of like comic and gaming area. The Ravenloft ads weren't quite as good, but nonetheless, they still had that immersive characteristic. The font signifies something different, a little bit gothic. The Ravenloft original book is actually really fun too. The flavor sort of text in that is kind of much more concise than Forgotten Realms, which would get a little bit bloated. Although I really do love those Dries Do'Urden books by R.A. Salvatore. And the artist I am going to mention basically created a lot of the Dark Sun campaign setting. And that, of course, is Brom. And he's just a magnificent artist. And you can see there just fantastic, fantastic stuff. And before you forget, he does some modern stuff. So this is the Modphius Conan the Barbarian RPG. He also does the cover art to that. So check that out. Thanks for going down memory lane with me. I'd like to give a shout out to the games crew. So that would be Dylan, Dave, John, Sean, James, Chris, and Adam from back in the day. If I've left anyone out, I apologize. Now, we will be back shortly for your usually scheduled episodes on Tarnished Bronze. Like, follow, and subscribe, and thanks for checking us out.